I'm an ordained minister with the Assemblies of God. And this program is called Living Free. I have a passion to see people walk in the freedom that Christ has called us to live in. I see too many people on a daily basis caught up in bondage to anxiety, depression, addiction, relationships. So many things in our life can take over and oppress us. And my passion is to see people set free and get on a road to freedom and stay in that freedom. You know, Jesus said, whom the Son has set free is free indeed. And so we need to walk in that freedom that Christ has sacrificed himself for us. And so today, I hope this broadcast will help you get started on your way to walking in freedom, or maybe it will help you move along your way. Maybe you're already walking in freedom and we just need a little bit of guidance and help. So hopefully today's broadcast will get you moving and get you started or keep you moving. And today, I want to talk about burnout. And so many people, it's interesting because if I think about it, maybe about 5 to 8 years ago, that word was used frequently, especially in my field as a therapist, but even just in general, people would use the word burnout. But I started thinking the other day, I have not heard a lot of people talking about burnout lately. And I think we should, because after the past 3 years, just with what's happened in our world, and how everyone's now moving forward and struggling, I think burnout is probably something we should be talking more about. And some of you might not fully understand what burnout is. Burnout is when you reach a place where you are mentally exhausted, you're emotionally exhausted, physically exhausted. You don't really have motivation to do much. You lack motivation. You just can't seem to get moving and even enjoy some things you used to enjoy. And also it's a time where you feel like, I just don't want to do anything. I don't want to go anywhere. And it's different than depression. So when I work again, you feel depressed during burnout? Sure. But burnout looks a little bit different because it's just this exhaustion that takes over from actually engaging in too many things and burning yourself out. And a lot of times we think, well, burnout really only works with people who are working all the time. And that's not true. I work with a lot of stay-at-home moms who experience burnout. If you have young children, many times I will work with moms who have children, like 3 or 4 children under the age of 5, and they feel burnt out. They're up most of the nights. They're not getting tons of sleep. They don't have a lot of time for self-care. Their husband, or spouse is typically probably working. So they're exhausted. So burnout can happen with anyone. And did you know your kids can experience burnout? I'm working with a lot. I specialize in kids and adolescents and teens as well. And I work with a lot of kids and teens who are in burnout. Why? Well, as parents, we want our kids involved in activities. And it is good. We want our kids doing things, involved in things because it's healthy for them. But oftentimes, I don't know if you've noticed, if you have kids at home, those of you who don't have children, maybe your children are grown, but sports nowadays with the clubs, it's almost like your child is working a job. They are spending 15 to 20 hours a week on some of these sports, club volleyball, club softball, club football, all these club sports. And they're not getting paid for it, mind you. The parents are paying quite a bit for their children to be doing these sports for 15 to 20 hours a week. So if you think about your kid for a moment and think about they're in school, okay, 7 hours a day, maybe they're in summer right now, but these sports don't just take place in summertime. They're throughout the school year as well. So if your child is in school 7 to 8 hours a day, that's 5 days a week, count the homework that they have to do, plus doing another activity 15 plus hours a week. Think of the exhaustion your child is going through. And parents too, because parents have to take them to these practices and, spend the time, shuffling them around. So children and teens can often experience burnout. And we don't want to raise our kids. We don't want to live our life like this. It's not healthy. It's not good for us. And it's not going to produce the relationships you want, nor the mental or physical health you want. A lot of physical conditions and illnesses can come out of burnout. I know what burnout is. I've been there, and sometimes I feel like, ooh, I'm heading back that direction. And, and how do we get there? A lot of people, my clients come in like, I don't know how I got here, but I just don't care anymore. I don't want to do anything. How do we get there? Well, one, we get there by not paying attention. Okay. When I left one practice and I was starting up my own practice and then building another practice with my business partner, that is probably a time I was not paying attention. I'm going into a new business, trying to set up a practice that I had never done before. And that was very anxiety producing, I will say. And it was just, I was like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? And I started seeing clients sometimes 5 to 6 days a week. And when I say seeing clients, I was seeing about 36 to 40 clients a week. And some of you think, well, that's not even full time. Well, in therapy, full time is about 28 to 32 clients a week because the work we do is very draining. We are working with people 7 to 8 hours a day nonstop in the crisis of their life. And you do that 4 to 5 days a week, it's very exhausting. So during that time, I was seeing clients sometimes 5 to 6 days a week. I was setting up an office. We were having to buy furniture. We were having to set up these practices, also interview other therapists to come on board with our practice, getting paperwork. There were so many things going on. That was just work. Personal life, I had my son at home trying to navigate his life and his world and his schedule. He was not driving at the time. He was only in, I think, 6th grade, going to 7th grade. There was a lot going on in my life. Oh, let's add ministry there because I was involved in ministry as well. So when you think about all these moving parts, and I just kept doing this and I didn't pay attention. I wasn't paying attention to how many hours I was putting in. I wasn't paying attention to the exhaustion I started feeling. And about a year and a half in doing this, I hit a wall. And that's what most of my clients will come in. They're like, I was doing great and everything, and I feel like I hit a wall. That's when you know you've hit burnout. It's when you feel like you've hit a wall. I was sitting there one day and I'm like, I can't do this. I am exhausted. I don't even want to get up in the morning. I just want to sleep all day. And I realized that I had overextended myself. And I did it. No one else did it to me. So oftentimes in burnout, no one else is doing it to you. You're doing it to yourself. Sometimes we can actually send our children into burnout by pushing them into various things and, making them. But, sometimes the kids themselves will push themselves into burnout. That's why if we don't understand as adults and as parents what burnout is and how to catch it, we aren't going to be able to help our kids identify it either. So during this time, when I hit this wall, I was like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And that's a red flag when you're like, I don't think I can do this anymore. I had to step back. And at that point, I immediately cut my schedule down. I took out working on a Saturday morning, and I took out working on a midweek, day. I had to do something. And some of you are like, well, I can't do anything. This is just my life and this is my schedule. And you know what? Unfortunately, that excuse doesn't lie with me, because I'm a therapist. I sit with clients who tell me that day in, well, there's nothing I can do. And I'm like, well, we're going to sit down and we're going to find something you can do, because it's either keep doing what you're doing and die early, or get creative in maneuvering your schedule and live longer and enjoy it. I don't know about you, but you can't enjoy life while you're living in burnout. You don't. And sometimes we have to take a step back and reevaluate our time, reevaluate our relationships, reevaluate our job. We have to sit down and just assess everything so that we can figure out what are we doing so that I can actually be healthy physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Did you know that pastors can also reach burnout? And people are like, pastors, they hardly work at all. Well, some of you might think they hardly work at all, but you don't spend a day with them. I grew up in ministry, so I know well what ministry takes from you. It's not just showing up, prepping a sermon, and you're done. You're dealing with people day in, day out. Sometimes it feels like 24/7. You're dealing with a congregation of people who have issues and problems and dealing with stressors, and they're coming to you, similar to coming to a therapist. Now, as a therapist, I can set my hours and I say, hey, from this time to this time, I can help you. If you have a crisis afterwards, an intense crisis, you're gonna have to call the crisis line. Pastors, unfortunately, a lot of times feel like, I can't, how do I send them to a crisis line? And they take on a lot. Pastors tend to take on more than what they should, and that's just because they're shepherds at heart. So pastors can also experience burnout. So one thing we want to do is we want to identify, how do I get there? Well, first of all, we have to stop and look at how many hours a week am I working? How many hours am I spending with my children, my husband, my family? And what other extracurricular activities am I doing? So during the time that I was doing all this stuff, and I had been approaching burnout way before I started my own business and practice. And this is where we have to look. So way before, I'd already set these unhealthy boundaries for myself. So if I go back when earlier years, when I was finishing up my master's program and I was working at the same time, I was heavily involved in ministry. There were several, I probably wasn't getting home sometimes, probably 3 or 4 nights a week till 10 o'clock at night. Start in the morning, get home at 10 o'clock at night. See, that should have been a clue to me. You're heading down a road that there's gonna be a big explosion and burnout's gonna happen. But because I just kept doing, I wasn't mindful. So this is what's so important about mindfulness. And I love that skill. We teach it in dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT. You'll hear me mention this often. I love this therapy because it is a skill-based therapy. But we talk about mindfulness. I was not being mindful of what was taking place in my life. I was just doing. I was doing, and I was not paying attention of what I was doing. See the difference? I was just doing, but not paying attention to what I was doing. And this is how it starts. We just get busy. We think this is great. I'm doing this over here. I'm doing this over here. And every once in a while, you feel tired. You feel like, okay, you just got to get back up. Got to keep moving. And that's what we say to ourselves. So that's kind of one of your first clues. Is I tell people all the time, when you hear yourself, you know what, I'm tired, but you just got to get up and keep going. When you hear the word, I got to get up and keep going, you want to take a step back and go, okay, what am I doing? So I often have my clients write out everything they do. Okay, what are you involved in? So that's the first thing we do. We list out, what are the things you're involved in? So for me, if I would have done that at the time, I would have listed out, okay, well, I'm in class. Okay, I'm doing class 2 or 3 times a week, getting out at 10 o'clock. Oh, I'm leading an addictions group, support group at my church. That's 1 night a week, and I'm not getting out till 9 o'clock at night. Oh, you know what? I'm involved in choir and worship ministry. So I have practice, 1 night a week. Oh, and on Sundays, I'm at church then, because I'm in worship and at this time, this was my schedule. I was there at church from 7:30 in the morning until about 12:30 in the afternoon, then back in the evening service. So as I started listing, if I would have listed out all these things, I would have seen like, oh, wow, that's a lot. And this is what I do with my clients. I'll take my whiteboard and we'll start writing things out that they're involved in. And all of a sudden they stop and they're like, oh, wow, that's a lot. I'm like, it is a lot. It is. And we place this expectation on ourselves to be able to do all of that. And when we do that, we just wear our mind, our body, our physical being down. And that's not what God's called us to do. He's not called us to live in exhaustion or to be overwhelmed or to be just stressed out. That's not what God has called. In fact, I'd like to read a scripture for you. And I read this before in some of my broadcasts because it's one of my favorites. And it's in the Message Bible. And this is out of Matthew chapter 11. And I love this one because this is so perfect for this topic of burnout. And it says, are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Isn't that amazing? You see, Jesus was like, I don't want you burnt out. I want you come to me. You're tired, you're worn out. See, oftentimes we feel like we have to do all these things. We have to stay busy, especially in our American culture. That seems to be almost a prideful thing about us, is that we're always, if you go to a group of people, what's the first thing they start talking about? Oh, what do you do? What are you involved in? And that becomes like the epicenter of the conversation. And so I think our values get misplaced, and we put it on this doing instead of being. And that's part of that mindfulness. How do I become about being instead of doing? Burnout is all about doing. And we do. And then we teach our kids, you do. You don't rest. And then we wonder why kids are experiencing so much anxiety, so much stress. You know, I sat with a young male yesterday in my session, and they're going through a very high conflict family court situation. And I work with the family court system. And this poor teenager, my heart broke as he's describing the stress, and I'm watching him physically, visibly shaking. And this is an intense family situation. And as I'm talking with him, to find out he's carrying everyone's backpack in this family system of he has to do this, or this is going to go the wrong way, or someone's going to stress out. And I'm sitting there, and this kid is in burnout. I'm physically watching his body riddled with anxiety and just shaking and convulsing. You see, we do this to our children when we are not healthy parents. We lead our children to burnout, to mental disorders, to exhaustion. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to do that to my child. I want to teach my son rest is important. Taking care of yourself is important. Yeah, getting work done, that's important. But if you're not mentally and physically and emotionally healthy, that work doesn't matter. And did you know that if you die tomorrow, guess what? Your work is going to go on. And probably within a year or two, they may not even remember who you are. And I know that sounds harsh, and it sounds, well, that's kind of mean. But the reality of it is, that's just work. You see, what's lasting and what you have as a lasting impact is your relationships with your family, your children, the impact you have for the body of Christ and those around you. If you're living and walking in burnout all the time, or you're getting to that place where you're getting ready to hit a wall, you're not doing anyone any good, and especially yourself. And being someone who's been there, I wasn't doing anyone any good because I was just like exhausted. So when you're exhausted, your mind and your emotions, sorry, you don't function that well. Your brain just does not have the focus and attention it needs to do what you need to do. You don't have the physical energy to give other people, more or less yourself. So you need to pay attention to what you're doing. So I encourage you, write out on a piece of paper all the things that you're involved in and that you're doing, including your children's life, your spouse's life. What are all the things that you guys are doing in your family system or just you yourself? And that's your first step to look at, am I sending myself to burnout? Do I feel myself going to burnout? Some of you are already saying, I'm already in burnout and I don't know what to do. I don't even want to get up and go to work. So the first thing I tell my clients, because that's when they're usually coming to me, is when they've kind of hit burnout. And I sit with them, and the first thing we start talking about is self-care. And I start asking, what are you doing for self-care? And it doesn't have to be big things like, I have to go get a massage or I have to go on a vacation. Those are wonderful ways of self-care. But self-care can be simple. Self-care can be as simple as saying no to someone. And some of you are like, no, that's a bad word. We don't say no. And that's part of your problem. Self-care is as simple as just telling someone, I can't do that today. Or, you know what, I'm not able to do this for you. And some of you are like, well, that's selfish. No, it's taking care of ourselves. Sometimes when you are physically exhausted or mentally exhausted, see, we get distorted beliefs about setting healthy boundaries for ourselves. And no is a big one. And I'm going to be honest with you, the Christian community is terrible at this. We are terrible at teaching people how to say no. Yes, we help other people, we help our family, but when it comes and it takes the cost is our own family, or the cost becomes my own mental or physical health, we need to start learning how to say no. You know what? Jesus took time away. Jesus said, hey, I got to go over here for a bit. You guys do this over here, but I'm taking a break. I need to take my own time. You know, Jesus modeled that. But yet we are teaching people that, oh, that's no, we are servants of God. We serve one another. And yes, we serve one another. But at the same time, you cannot place that over your relationship with God. So many believers, when they come in and they're struggling with this concept, the first thing I say is, well, then tell me, how often are you spending with God? How much time? And most of them aren't spending much time with God. They're spending a lot of time doing God things. And I'll raise my hand. I hit burnout because I was doing all these things for God, and I was doing school, and I was doing that addictions group. I was helping people, and I was in ministry. I was doing so many things for God, but I was not spending time with God in relationship. And this is where our priorities get mixed up, and this is why you hit burnout. See, if we spent more time with God, then you're listening. You know, God's word says that Jesus said, my sheep know my voice. So when you spend time, you have to spend time with someone to know their voice, right? If you're not spending time with God, you're not going to know his voice. You're not going to hear when he's telling you, don't say yes to that. Don't say yes. I don't have to say yes to every ministry opportunity that someone comes up and says, I need you to do this. And I'll be honest, I grew up in ministry. My dad was a pastor. I know what it's like in ministry to not always have people there. And that's why I struggled. I struggled saying no because I knew what it was like. And so I would go overboard on my empathy and overboard that cost me something. It cost my own spiritual health, mental health, and physical health. So sometimes self-care is just saying that simple word, no, I can't today. You know, I'm so sorry. Maybe next time. Feel free to ask me next time. So sometimes learning the word no. Sometimes it's just taking a few minutes to do something you enjoy. You know, sometimes it's just like, you know what, I just need to go out and go for a walk. Or maybe I do need to take a couple hours and, you know, maybe go up north because it's really hot right here right now. So going for a walk may not be pleasant, and go for a hike. It could be as simple as doing a mindfulness, activity where you just take a break, take 20 minutes and go into your bedroom and sit down. And there's a lot of wonderful Christian mindful videos on YouTube that works with breathing and helping you just kind of relax and focus. Maybe it's just setting time aside each day that you get to spend time with God and listening to, some Christian music or a podcast or a broadcast like this. Self-care is really important because if you don't take care of yourself, you're going to have a hard time teaching your children how to take care of themselves, and you're going to have a hard time ministering to people. You can't minister to people beyond where you are. And if you're tired and worn out and just exhausted, you don't have much to give other people. And so I know some of you are sitting in burnout. I know you are. And I think at this time, it's really important. Just list out those things that you're involved in and begin to eliminate some things. And they're probably all good things. That's what's hard. They're all the things I was doing were good. It wasn't like I was in frivolous things. They were good things, but they were eating up so much of my time. I couldn't take care of my own mental health, my emotional, my spiritual health. And I had to begin to take the eraser and say, I have to eliminate this. And I have to eliminate this. I have to say I'm at a good point in my life where I don't say yes to everything. And you know what? Sometimes people get upset. I'm going to be honest with you. Some people get upset with me like, how dare you say no? And that's not mine to own. That's something they have to deal with. But I always pray about it. Lord, if this is something I need to do, then direct me. And, I make sure I take time for myself. I make sure I take time to do things I enjoy and that I have fun. And you know, at nighttime, I don't check my emails at night. When I get home from work, that's something I set a long time ago. I don't do that. It causes me stress. It pulls me back in. I set my phone on Do Not Disturb at 9 p.m. I don't want people calling me. Now, my family's on a special link that if I need something, they can call me. But for anyone else, Do Not Disturb goes on at 9 p.m. These are simple ways that you can come in and do some self-care. It's not grand. It's not huge. There's little things you can start with and that you can kind of bring in healthiness to your life. And then you can start modeling for kids. You might have to sit down with your kids and label things out for them and say, we need to start eliminating because, honey, you're spending way too much time and you're reaching burnout. I can see you're overstressed. And we don't want our kids going into adulthood getting burnt out before the age of 22. And I've seen it happen. So today, if you're experiencing that, I just hope this broadcast can help you somehow just begin to take care of yourself. And the first step I want to encourage you in taking care of yourself is to develop a relationship with Jesus Christ. He loves you. He wants to have a relationship with you. He wants you, just as he said, he wants you to come in. He wants to partner with you. And it's as simple as just saying, Jesus, I know I'm a sinner. I know I've done wrong. Please forgive me of my sins. Come into my life. Come and be the Lord of my life. I recognize you as the Son of God. And I want you to be the Lord of my life. It is as simple as that. If you did that, that's your first step to self-care and hopefully moving out of burnout. I hope some of these tips and tools are helpful for you. I may need to do another broadcast on burnout and go into some more skills and tips to help you move out of it and what to do when you reach that place. So look forward to a future broadcast on, handling burnout part 2. But thank you for joining me today. And I hope you move forward in freedom and bringing just freedom to yourself from burnout. And I pray blessings over you today. Thank you for joining me.